Welcome to the show. My guest today is Melanie Drouin, Senior Consultant at Great Place to Work Canada. She has facilitated workshops and supported leaders around the world. Melanie believes that an organization's success is based on its culture and the ability of its leaders to bring out the best in its people. Now, I would say that over the course of COVID-19, it was never more important for leaders and managers to create the right culture for working remotely. Melanie, let's face facts. The best company is the one that lets its workers work from Barbados, right?
Right, absolutely. We should all be working from a beach right now.
So based on the stories I've been hearing from at-home office workers and reports of increased levels of stress and anxiety during COVID, it's my opinion, and I know it's shared by many others, that we're actually not doing work from home right. How do you feel about that?
What I'm seeing working with a number of clients across all types of industries throughout Canada is actually a mixed bag. We're seeing some organizations do a really, really good job of it, where actually their employee engagement has increased and they're getting some really, really good results. And we're seeing some companies who really are struggling with finding their way through this new normal. And so for companies who are doing it well, what we're seeing them do is really continue to demonstrate and build trust with their people. We know through all of the research that's done through workplace culture and the impact of culture on business results as well, we know that trust is at a foundation to really create that environment where people will bring their best selves to work and be able to innovate and want to do more and really create those strong relationships. And so companies who've been able to continue to do that while their workforce was mostly at home,
Mhm.
um, have done so by continuing to demonstrate trust in their workers, by continuing to create that great environment where we still have those touch points that are a little bit informal, where we can connect together as human beings.
Right.
And companies who have struggled, and from our research at Great Place to Work, we'd say that in Canada, it's about 40% of the companies we work with actually, for in a sense, that have struggled with this year. And what we're seeing with these companies who struggle is often these are the companies where leaders don't feel comfortable not seeing their employees every day and are making their employees feel that that lack of trust is there. For example, I have one organization that I heard about where they've actually started using mouse click tracking between 9 and 5 p.m. to determine how much their employees are working.
Oh, come on.
And I mean, if someone's on the phone with a client and is not clicking through, it looks as if they're not working. How stressful is that for a worker, right? And so really the best practice here, and there's lots of best practice that we've learned about working from home throughout the years and even more in the past year, but the best practice here is to be outcome driven, to look at the outcomes. Is the work being done well? Are people meeting their target? And then to allow that flexibility around that on the when and the how.
Mm.
And the organizations who are doing well with the work from home are absolutely doing that. And that also has the added effect that not only are people focused on creating good outcomes for the organization, but that flexibility allows people to really sort of protect their work-life balance, which is one of the issues we've been hearing a lot about with people working from home, right?
Oh,
If your
yeah.
boss doesn't trust you, it's very unlikely that you're going to feel comfortable putting those barriers that you need to put around your work-life balance to be able to keep a healthy lifestyle while we're going through out of this. And let's face it, facing a lot of additional outside stress in addition to what we normally would be going through.
Oh, man, so much there.
Mhm.
I love that sort of piece of advice about it's about the outcome, not about how you got there, especially in the time that we're in. I know leaders have good intentions. Obviously, everyone was pushed into this scenario, but I think oftentimes people get tempted. We get tempted just to Google, how do we do how to work from home better, work from home strategies. And for me, it makes sense that the the industry, broadly speaking, would look to another sector that has done this really well. And one is the tech sector, which comprises many engineers working together from around the world. And they do something called stand-ups, which is, it makes sense. You have tickets that you're working together or separately on. Your work concludes. So in the morning, you check in at 9 a.m. and you all update each other individually about those tickets so that you can check things off the list and make sure you're organized. And then at the end of the day, you check in and you do the same thing, because you're all sort of doing the similar things, working together. But there's a lot of items that need to be checked off in that world. That doesn't work so well if you're not a tech company, if you're not, an engineering-based company. And yet I'm hearing so much about these quote unquote stand-ups or similar check-in meetings where everyone has to explain what they're doing individually, what their plans are for the day. And then at the end of the day, tell everybody what they did do. It's not that far away from this click and keyboard tracking that you talked about.
Absolutely, John. That's something that I've heard a lot about as well. Sort of organizations creating those meetings that they weren't having before people was working from home,
Mhm.
and that are making people feel more like they're being checked up on. Are you really working? And I'm going to make you talk about it in front of a group as well, to make sure that you feel all eyes on you and feel like you have to really come up with something. And those check-in meetings, those stand-up meetings, I have absolutely nothing against them if they serve an actual purpose in terms of connecting the team together and facilitating teamwork. But
Mhm.
what we're seeing now is people adopting these kinds of meetings more as a let's make sure we're doing something type of meeting than an actual collaboration meeting. And the
Right.
frequency of those meetings, I think, is a really, really important point, and the timing of them as well. In an industry, like you said, John, if people are working on tickets and those tickets are changing every day and it's a half-hour thing to work through something, it might make sense to connect every day. On a team where people are working on projects that take 2 or 3 months to complete, that daily check-in where you're scratching your head thinking, well, I've been working on the exact same thing for 3 days. What am I going
Right.
to say today? That can be very stressful. Same thing with the timing. So, those meetings at 9 a.m. and at 5 p.m. every day, again, that can feel, if there's no business reason to have them specifically at those times, that can feel like I'm really checking in to make sure that you're in front of your computer ready to go. And so my best practice that I've seen work very well and that I share with clients who want to have those types of meetings because they find actual value in people sharing is connect with your team to see what's the frequency at which we need to have that? What'll be helpful to you? And what's the best time of day to have those meetings that work for everyone?
Mhm.
Right. And then you're creating those collaboration meetings where people are coming up as their best selves and are able to collaborate and actually share because it's coming from a place of true concern for the team and how we work together and how we help each other out, which is very different than the, you know, 9 a.m. every day and 5 p.m. every day to share things that aren't necessarily valuable. So it's really about finding that balance and what works for your team versus what works for you as a leader who might be feeling a little bit insecure.
Couldn't agree more. And managers, leaders, I hope you're listening. Melanie, you said earlier, all eyes on me, all eyes on me. That sense of pressure. Here's one that I think all of us can relate to. Cameras on, cameras off. What's
Yep,
your
that is a
position?
good one and a big debate as well. So again, there's no one size fits all, and there's no, black and white straightforward rules for the camera. I'm a big fan of the camera because it gives us a little bit more context. We have the body language, we have, just a little bit more contact when we see each other than when we're just hearing the voice. It also, if you're like me and you tend to get easily distracted, having that sort of movement of the people in the room, that sort of mimic being in a room, can be helpful to stay engaged.
Mhm.
That being said, how we interact with each other through the cameras is a bit different than if we're all in the same room. when we're using cameras, we're all looking at each other. You feel the eyes on you a lot more than if you're in a room where people are sitting around a table and you might be looking at one person at a time.
Right.
So there's that aspect. But more importantly, I think we've got to be mindful of the technology requirements to have video running, especially, when we might have our kids learning from home and also using video to do their school because the school is closed or there's been a COVID case in their class. So the kids have to be home for a couple of weeks.
Mm.
We've got to be mindful of that when we're forcing people to use the camera. We might be giving them a worse experience if the camera is going like this for them
Yes.
because there's 3 people using video camera at the same time because of the requirement. So I think it's important that we allow some flexibility there. My rule of thumb is when I use webcams, and I'm on a webcam all the time now, I don't even realize that it's on anymore. But my rule of thumb is when I work with my client, it's really dependent on the activity and each person's connection bandwidth, basically.
Yeah.
So if we're doing a workshop where we're brainstorming, I really want to see everyone online because that makes it a lot easier to get that sort of activity going.
Right.
And if there's a couple people for whom it's creating a really bad experience to be online because of technological issues, I'm fine with them having their camera off and maybe if they're able to turning it on when they're speaking. So at least we can see them a little bit better and have that connection. If we're
So
doing a quick touch-based conversation for 5 minutes, we might not need the webcam. So again, it's really about being flexible to create the best environment and accommodate our people so that they can have the best experience.
I agree, and it goes back to trust too, as you mentioned earlier. Trust that your workers, if they were in a position to put on their camera when asked to, they would do so, right? And can you get into a little bit, since we're talking about webcam and it's part of this office work environment? Can you talk about some other tools or tips, maybe in terms of just breaking away from the webcam and the, this desk that we're all tied to? Maybe a few tips or tricks for doing work from home better that you've seen or that you've provided advice in your consulting that you've heard good things about?
Absolutely. So there's tons of those, right? You mentioned earlier people going on the internet to find best practices. And there's lots of tips on there where people will say, go for a walk at lunch break or, set a schedule this way or that way, set up your workstation this way or that way. And they're all good. Again, I'm really not a black and white person. I live in the gray. And I think, again, it's important for people to find what works for them, right? And so for some people, going for a walk will be the perfect thing for them. For others, it might not be, depending on where you live and the temperature outside as well. I know for me personally, I've got 2 workstations, one where I can sit and one where I can stand up a little bit. And so that helps me just to move my computer around. But I do dance parties. That's my big thing. If I'm starting to feel like it's getting to me and I don't have the energy, I'll just put on some music and dance for 5 minutes. And actually, I've done this in the workplace a few times years ago to alleviate stress as well. So, you can do things like that for yourselves. The important thing is to have something that you do in your day that allows you to decompress, right? What I'm hearing a lot is people who missed a commute because that was their alone time. That was their time to sort of relax. And now we're moving from, I'm working at the kitchen table and I'm turning around and I'm starting to make dinner. And so it is really important for people to find that time for themselves so that we can bring our best selves to work and to our family, to our alone time, to find those moments. So whatever works for you, the main thing is to keep doing it. Because when we had a commute, we had to commute. There was no choice. Even if we worked a little bit later, we still had that half hour or 45 minutes or whatever. And so now it's easy to say, oh, I'm too busy, I won't do it today, and then get out of the habit. So create whatever habits you can for yourselves and follow through on them. Make sure they're working for you. Change them up when you need to. Involve other people if you can. Going for a walk with a friend who lives nearby at lunchtime may be more beneficial than going for a walk on your own and thinking about work the entire time. Whatever you do. And again, as leaders, allowing the flexibility for your people to be able to take part in those activities that'll clear their brains, get their body moving, make them feel better so that they can be more productive, so that they can be more engaged in what they're doing after they've taken that time for themselves.
I love it, Melanie. And I love and completely endorse with you the dance parties. We need more than ever, and our research shows this too, to feel alive, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. The more we sit, the more we're craving physically and emotionally to feel truly alive. And when do you feel that? It's not when you're sitting, it's when you're moving. You're using your body and brain, but also, when you're in sports, when you're using physical activity, when you're dancing. And if you can't do it in front of other people, like me, do it by yourself, and turn off that webcam. That's such good advice. I hope everyone will take that. In just a few closing questions, Mel, can you, let's say someone's watching this, they're in a leadership position. They're recognizing that maybe they haven't been doing things as well as they could in creating that right type of culture, and they want to hit reset. What are some maybe questions that leaders might ask themselves in resetting the way that they've been doing work from home?
That's a really, really good question, John, because it's really important that on a regular basis as leaders, we take a look at what we're doing, what practices we're putting together, and take that critical look and see what can I do a little bit differently to get an even better result, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we can do on a regular basis, whether we're working from home, whether we're not working from home, is really think about, what am I doing that might be making people feel less valued instead of more valued, right? That's when we demonstrate trust, when we listen to people, when we give them flexibility, that makes people feel valued, that makes them feel heard, that makes them feel cared for. So really taking a critical look and looking at, is what I'm doing really making people feel valued, or are there things that I'm doing because it makes me feel better and might not be helpful for my team? And then
Mm,
think about how we can do things a little bit differently on that. And again, it's all about building trust. Whether you're looking at, great place to work methodology is based on trust, but look at all of the thought leaders out there around workplace cultures. Simon Sinek is a great one that I really turn to often, but there's a lot out there. Everyone is talking about trust because the research shows that it creates a good environment and it creates results, like KPIs show
right.
it. And so it's really about looking inwards to say, what can I do a little bit differently to make sure that my people feel trusted, that they feel supported, and that they feel cared for, really.
And how about actually going to your teams, your organizations? Now you've made that decision. How do you sort of set the table and get people to give you input, but at the same time, let's be honest, we don't want to hear a bunch of people complaining about,
Mhm.
there's that double-edged sword of asking for people's input and how things could be improved, and you risk just hearing more complaints than solutions. How can leaders go about involving their team members in doing work from home better?
That's a great question because you are right. A lot of leaders shy away from having those conversations because we don't want to spend half our day having one-on-one conversations, which turning into a complaining
Mm-hmm.
festival. And so what we certainly can do as leaders, first of all, is set the tone prior to those conversations to say, I want to hear what we can do better. And I'm hoping that our discussion will resolve around solutions and suggestions versus just talking about the things that obviously we need to bring to life. If things aren't working, we need to discuss about it, but let's really be solutions focused. I want to
Mm-hmm.
hear your suggestions. And it's also important that people feel heard.
Right.
Oftentimes when I start working with companies who are sort of in a bit of a downward spiral in terms of their culture and how people are feeling at work, oftentimes it's because people do not feel heard when they are complaining about something or offering suggestions.
Right.
So we also don't want to cut that off too much. We want to allow people to speak up. And if we're not be able to implement their suggestions, explaining why. And that's really, really powerful. And that's the step we often forget. We might have explained it to one person, but maybe not everyone. And so when people are coming to us with problems, with barriers that they're facing, with suggestions, and that they don't feel heard,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to keep going and that's going to keep coming up. So as leaders, if we're not able to act on them, at the very least, circling back and having a conversation about why it's not possible, and maybe let's start looking for new suggestions. That's a top thing you can do to make people feel heard, right?
I,
And that's the important piece.
and I know you would agree too. It's important for a leader um, to be vulnerable in terms of, because we hear this, oh, be vulnerable, be vulnerable. I think a true act of showing vulnerability as a leader is to say, listen, things might have been, not been going the way as planned. I had good intentions, right? We had good intentions as a team. We want to hear from you too. So start by acknowledging that maybe some decisions were made and it was way too long before doing this kind of big check-in. Melanie,
Absolutely.
uh, what about the future? Just your thoughts on, we're getting to a place now where some people are getting comfortable, despite the drawbacks. It's working for some people, and they're starting to ask themselves questions like, should I move to a farther location because I believe there's going to be a shift in working from home once we go back to normal, and I might be in a more comfortable, or there's a likelihood that work from home is here to stay in many sectors. Or people are wondering if they should renew their lease or not, sell their car. uh, I think this comes back to communication, but can you say a bit about it? Like, should we be keeping our employees in the dark, or should we be updating them regularly on what the plans are for the lease on our building and whether we're going to renew it? How do you walk that line?
As with everything related to trust, transparency and sharing as much information as possible is always the way to go, right? Even if the information is we don't know, we're
Mhm.
having discussions and we're weighing the pros and cons of different things. It's important for people to know that you're thinking about it, that you're thinking about them. It speaks to that vulnerability piece as well if the information is we don't know. But whatever you're considering, it is important to keep people informed and, if possible, involved in the discussions around, what would you like to see happen when the new normal comes around? How would
Yeah.
you like to see it? And if you're an individual contributor that's not a part of those discussions and you're thinking, okay, do I sell my condo in town to buy myself a house in the country because I don't expect I'll be having to commute as much, maybe one day a week? Have that conversation before making a decision. Have
Yes.
that conversation with your employer to say, this is what I'm thinking. Is it is it realistic for me to think that? They might not be able to tell you right away, yes, in a year this is what we're going to be doing, but they can let you know what they're thinking. And if they think you're taking a huge risk, if they think that they'll be able to be flexible with you if you make that decision and something else comes up. So it is all about communication and making that communication two-way as
That's
much as
it.
possible.
That's it. The transparency should go two ways about what you're thinking. So just before we go, Melanie, what's new for you with Great Place to Work? What's the year looking like ahead? Any interesting research topics? Catch us up. Would love to hear about it.
Absolutely. So at Great Place to Work, we do a lot of research. So we do employee surveys, standardized employee survey around the world, over 60 countries, millions of people answering it every year. So we do a lot of research. And so we're starting to see some of our COVID research come out in articles. There was a great one published on the Great Place to Work US website this morning. The
Hmm.
Canadian one's going to be coming out shortly, an article and a deeper white paper where we're really looking at COVID and how it's impacted very, very deeply the results in Canada. And we're looking at different industries and all of that. So that's coming up. That's going to be super interesting. We're always doing tons of research. So obviously any topic that's really actual right now, inclusion's a big one, mental wellness, all of these things. We've got a lot of best practices and articles and whatnot coming out regularly.
Mhm.
And we're still working really, really hard with our clients to try to recognize great workplaces. So those are the organizations whose employees rate them really, really well on the employee survey.
Right.
We do certification and we publish lists of best workplaces. So we're still doing all that work, plus the consulting for organizations who are struggling a little bit, who need a little bit more help. to do that. And actually, while we're talking about our work, because I think it's really well related to everything we just discussed, we published a book last year, and it's written by one of my colleagues in Ireland, Bob Lee. And the book, very, very easy read, is named Trust Rules.
Mm.
And it's available on Amazon for like $15. It's a really, really easy read. And it's 16 easy rules that leaders can follow to help build and maintain trust with their teams. So if you're one of these people who's struggling around, what can I do to do more trust? That's the kind of thing, whether it's Great Place to Work's book or any other book, or, videos out there, there's so much material out there. I would urge you to, you know, see what's available out there for you to really start doing things a little bit differently to make a difference, because that's a Great Place to Work mission. That's my mission. That's why I'm doing this work now, is we really want to create better workplaces for everyone, better workplaces for all, so that the world is a better place. And so as a leader and as an individual contributor, we'll have our role to play in that. And so at Great Place to Work, we're just going to continue chipping away at that. And we're hoping as many people as possible get on the journey with us.
I like it. Melanie Drouin, thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks everyone for watching and listening. And don't forget, later today, schedule that dance party.